In this lesson, I'm going to talk about the conditional execution concept in Python. We have been working with several statements such as the if statements, which is a conditional statement, the else, and so on. Here, I'm going to clarify the concept further by diving into the conditional or the Boolean logic within Python language. So the conditional statements. In order to write useful programs, we almost always need the ability to check conditions and change the behavior of the program accordingly. So the conditional statements give us this ability. For instance, as I mentioned earlier, the if statement. So every single time, if it's raining outside, you would need to take an umbrella. If it's sunny outside, then you would not need an umbrella, and so on. So it'll be an if, then, and else. And that's simple logic. Even in plain English language, we use it all the time. The arithmetic expressions simply evaluate two numeric values, whereas a Boolean expression, sometimes also called a predicate, may also only have one or two possible values, such as false or true. So a Boolean expression is an expression that is either true or false. So for example, let me go to my shell here and demonstrate this. So if I say something like 5 equals 5, and notice the two equal sign in Python in essence means equals, which is not the same as a single equal sign in mathematics. So if I say 5 equals 5 in Python, okay, without giving a space, of course. So 5 equals 5, one more time. And Python is going to say true. If I say something like 5 equals 6, Python is going to say false. So this way, Python knows that the values are either true or false using the Boolean expressions. Here are various comparison operators. Some of them we've been working with in previous lessons, but here's a list again. For example, x is not equal to y. Python would use x exclamation mark equals y, which implies that x is not equal to y. Similarly, x is greater than y, using the greater than sign, the less than sign, less than greater to, and so on. We can also use and or between comparison operators in Python language. Okay, so a powerful way of using these comparison operators along with your Boolean logic to build your code. Here's another example. So let me in fact demonstrate this quickly. So let's say if x equals 6 and y equals 2, and if we need to evaluate whether x is greater than 2 and I can say something like x over y is greater than 2 or not. And Python says it's true, which means if x is 6, y is 2, of course my first expression here is x is greater than 2, which is true because 6 is greater than 2. And I'm also evaluating whether x divided by y is greater than 2 or not. So if I divide x by y, which means 6 divided by 2 is 3, which is also greater than 2. So this expression also evaluates to be true. So therefore, Python says, okay, the first expression and the second expression both are true. Let's do some other examples. So here we have, let's say x equals 8, for instance, and let's evaluate. Let's say something like 1 is less than x is less than 10. And I'm going to quickly write a comment so that you know. This is, by the way, the same as 1 less than x and x is less than 10. Okay, hit enter and Python says it's true. But if I say something like 10 is less than x is less than 20, Python is going to say it's false. I can also say something like not, and then specify like 10 is less than x is less than 20. Python is going to say it's true. So again, you can use any of these comparison operators and evaluate expressions based upon your own requirement. I'm also going to show you a list of different expressions and the way you can use these comparison operators and Boolean logic. So let me go ahead and bring up our shell editor here. So click on File, File New, and this brings up our blank idle shell here. So here, for instance, I can say something like, I'm just going to demonstrate various possibilities of you can use these comparison operators and use Boolean logic. Where x is 10, y is 20 here, for instance. And I can say something like b is my variable, and if I say x equals 10, now what do you think this would do? This would simply assign a true value to b. Okay, so this would say simply like assigns true to b. Okay, similarly, if I were to say something like b equals x is exclamation mark and my equal sign equals 10, and what this would do is simply assigns a false to b. Okay, let's take a step further. What if I say b equals something like x equals 10 and y equals 20? This would assign true value to b. Okay, so this way you can build your own logic and take a look at it. And once you have assigned these values, of course you can evaluate, right? You can test and check and see whether these values are true or not. And the reason why I bring this up, the conditional execution, is because when you're working with your if statements or your logic or other logic statements and you're building your code, understanding the conditional execution is important, and especially knowing what's going on behind the scenes and what is Python doing here. What are you giving Python to evaluate? And remember our flowchart concept. When you're actually creating a flowchart for your entire program, you would then incorporate these conditional execution concepts within that program. Let me in fact demonstrate one last example, and I'm going to use quickly the shell here. Minimize this. Let's go to our shell, and I'm going to say something like a equals true. Okay, and I'm going to say b equals false. Great, so two variables, a equals true and b equals false. Let's tell Python to print this. So what if I say something like print a equals, and then use my variable a, and then I'm going to say print b equals, and then my variable b as well. And Python is simply going to print the two values. Say a equals true and b equals false. What happens when I change the value of a? So now I'm going to say the variable a is false, and then use the same print statement and see our results. So here, of course, our a equals our variable a, and then our b equals our variable b. Okay, same print statement. All I did here was simply change the value of a to false. And this time, when I hit enter on the keyboard, notice Python says, wait a minute, a equals false and b also equals false. So this way, you can work with the Boolean logic. You can tell Python what needs to be done, what to specify by specifying the variables. So practice using these comparison operators over and over again. These are very important as we build more code. These are very helpful. And let's move to our next lesson.